The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that made Ambassador Day One grip his seat. Through the viewport, the Galactic Council Citadel hung in space like a massive jewel. It was bigger than any city on Earth. A structure so large it had its own artificial gravity. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds circled it, like insects around a lamp. Day One straightened his simple gray suit and glanced at his companion. Hana sat perfectly still in the seat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. She wore black clothing with no decorations or symbols. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She looked like she could be a secretary or an assistant. No one would guess she was a bodyguard. That was exactly the point. "We're being scanned," Hana said quietly. Her eyes never moved from the viewport, but Day One knew she was aware of everything happening around them. 4 different security systems. "They're checking our weapons." "You're not carrying any weapons," Day One said. "I know." Hana's lips curved in a small smile. "That's what confuses them." "Yes." The transport docked with a gentle bump. As they walked through the airlock, Day One felt his stomach drop slightly. The gravity here was different from Earth, slightly heavier. He would get used to it in a few hours. Hana walked beside him, as if nothing had changed. The docking bay was enormous. Ships from across the galaxy rested in their berths like sleeping giants. Day One saw vessels made of living coral, ships that looked like they were carved from single pieces of crystal, and craft that seemed to be made of pure light held in metal frames. Each one represented a different species, a different civilization. A tall alien approached them. It had blue skin that sparkled like stars were trapped beneath the surface. Its body was thin and elegant, with 4 arms ending in delicate fingers. When it spoke, a translator device on its chest converted the sounds into words Day One could understand. "Ambassador Day One of the Terran Federation," the alien said. Its tone was polite but cold. "I am Guide Kelshan. I will show you to your quarters. The summit begins tomorrow." As they walked through the massive corridors of the Citadel, Day One saw hundreds of different species. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others floated, crawled, or moved in ways he couldn't quite understand. Many stopped to stare at him and Hana. Most of the looks were not friendly. "They don't like us much," Hana observed quietly. "We're new," Day One said. "Humanity has only been part of the Galactic Council for 60 years. That's nothing to species that have been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They think we're children playing at politics. Are they wrong?" Day One smiled. "We'll find out." Their quarters were small but comfortable. 2 rooms connected by a common area. The furniture adjusted automatically to human proportions when they entered. Day One sat down heavily on a chair and rubbed his eyes. "What do you think?" he asked. Hana was already checking the rooms. She ran her fingers along the walls, examined the doors, and tested the windows. "Security is good," she said. "But it's designed to keep people out, not to protect what's inside. They don't expect violence here." "The Citadel has been neutral ground for 10,000 years, Day One said. "No one fights here. It's against every law and custom." "Laws and customs change," Hana said. She sat down across from him. "You didn't bring me here to enjoy the view." Day One nodded slowly. "The Cathari Empire holds the Guardian contract. Do you know what that means?" "A1. They provide security and bodyguards for the Council's diplomats," Hana said. "It's worth trillions in credits and gives them enormous political influence." "Exactly. And they've held that contract for 300 years. No one has challenged them because no one can beat them in combat. The Cathari are warriors. Fighting is everything to their culture. They have natural armor, 4 arms, and they've spent centuries perfecting their combat techniques." "And you want to challenge them," Hana said. It wasn't a question. Every 100 years, at the summit, any species can challenge for the Guardian contract. There's a contest, combat trials, tactical exercises, endurance tests. It lasts 7 days. The winner species gets the contract for the next century. Hana was quiet for a long moment. "You brought 1 bodyguard to a diplomatic summit with thousands of delegates. You brought me. This isn't about protection. No, Day One admitted. It's about making a statement. Humanity needs to prove we belong here. We need to show these ancient civilizations that we're not just primitive mammals who stumbled into space travel. The Cathari have been getting arrogant. They've been using their position to bully smaller species. If we can challenge them, if we can show them they're not invincible, it changes everything. You want me to fight a Cathari champion? Hana said. I want you to do what you do best. Adapt. Survive. Win. Day One leaned forward. I've seen your record, Hana. You've trained in 17 different martial arts. You've studied alien combat techniques for 5 years. You don't fight with strength. You fight with your mind. That's what we need. Hana stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars glittered in the black of space. What if I lose? Then, humanity remains a minor species in galactic politics. We'll be ignored and dismissed for another century at least. But if you win, Day One smiled. If you win, we prove that humans belong here, that we can compete with species that have been civilized for thousands of years. No pressure then, Hana said dryly. The next morning, the summit began. The Great Chamber was a vast dome where delegates from 500 species gathered. Day One and Hana entered together. And immediately the whispers started. Aliens turned to stare at the two humans. Some looked curious. Most looked dismissive. At the center of the chamber stood the Cathari delegation. There were 12 of them. Each one over 2 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in crystalline plates that grew naturally from their skin, forming armor that shimmered with inner light. 4 powerful arms hung at their sides. Their faces were sharp and angular, with eyes that glowed red. The largest Cathari stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the chamber without need for a translator. The Cathari had learned many languages during their centuries of dominance. I am Velthar, War Master of the Cathari Empire. For 300 years, my people have held the Guardian contract. We have proven ourselves in combat against every species that dared to challenge us. We are the strongest, the fastest, the most skilled warriors in the galaxy. He looked directly at Day One. Does any species here believe they can defeat us? The chamber was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Day One stood slowly. Every eye in the massive room turned to him. He was one of the smallest beings present. Unremarkable, compared to the towering aliens around him. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. I am Ambassador Day One of the Terran Federation. On behalf of humanity, I challenge the Cathari for the Guardian contract. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, the chamber erupted in laughter. It started with the Cathari delegation and spread through the room like a wave. Aliens of every shape and size laughed at the idea that humans, one of the newest and weakest species in the galaxy, would dare to challenge the mighty Cathari. Velthar's red eyes fixed on Day One. The War Master wasn't laughing. You mock us with this joke? No joke, Day One said. I invoke the ancient right of challenge. My guardian against yours. 7 days of trials. Winner takes the Guardian contract. Velthar's crystalline armor seemed to glow brighter with his anger. Who is your champion, little human? Where is this mighty warrior you think can defeat me? Day One gestured to Hana, who stood quietly beside him. She was barely 1.7 meters tall, small even by human standards. She carried no weapons, wore no armor. To the assembled species, she looked like a child. The laughter grew louder. Velthar stared at Hana for a long moment. Then he threw back his head and roared with laughter. This is your champion? A tiny female? With no armor? No weapons? Nothing? Hana met his gaze steadily. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Velthar's laughter died. Something in Hana's calm stare bothered him, though he couldn't say what. He turned to the council moderator. Very well. I accept this challenge. In 7 days, I will crush this human. And no species will dare to question Cathari superiority again. The council moderator, an ancient being whose species had existed since before recorded time, nodded slowly. The challenge is accepted. The contest of guardians will begin tomorrow at dawn. May the most worthy species prevail. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, still laughing and whispering about the foolish humans, Hana walked beside Day One in silence. "You could have warned me that would happen," she said quietly. "Would it have changed anything?" Hana thought about it. "No." "Then let them laugh," Day One said. "Tomorrow, you'll give them something else to talk about." That night, while the galaxy prepared to watch what they thought would be the shortest contest in history, Hana stood alone in the training room of their quarters. She moved through combat forms, practicing movements she had learned from a dozen different worlds. Her body flowed like water, each motion precise and controlled. She wasn't thinking about winning or losing. She wasn't thinking about making history or representing humanity. She was thinking about the War Master's face, about how he moved, about the way his crystalline armor reflected light. She was thinking about patterns, and Hana was very good at recognizing patterns. The arena was built into the heart of the citadel. It was ancient, older than most of the civilizations that now used it. The floor was made of a material that could shift and change, creating different terrains for different trials. The ceiling was open to space, held back by an invisible energy field. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around the combat floor, and every single one was filled. Beings from 500 worlds had come to watch the contest. Most had come to see the Cathari demonstrate their superiority once again. Many had come to laugh at the humans who dared to challenge them. A few, very few, had come because they were curious about what would happen. Hana stood at one end of the arena. She wore simple black clothing that allowed her to move freely. Her feet were bare. She carried nothing. Across from her, War Master Velthar looked like a god of war from ancient legends. His crystalline armor caught the light from 1,000 sources and threw it back in dazzling patterns. In his 4 hands he held traditional Cathari weapons, plasma-edged blades that hummed with deadly energy. The contest moderator, floating above the arena on a gravity platform, spoke in a voice that echoed through the massive space. The first trial is single combat. 5 rounds. Each round ends when one combatant scores a clear point by striking a vital area or disarming their opponent. Lethal force is forbidden. The trial ends when one combatant wins 3 rounds. The moderator paused, looking down at the 2 fighters. "Begin." Velthar moved immediately. Despite his size, he was incredibly fast. He crossed half the arena in 3 massive strides, his 4 arms moving in a pattern that Hana recognized from her studies. The Cathari fighting style was called the Storm of Blades, and it was designed to overwhelm opponents with pure aggression. Hana didn't try to block or counter. She simply moved backward, keeping just out of range of his weapons. Her eyes tracked all 4 of his arms, watching the patterns of his strikes. Velthar pressed forward, his blades creating a web of deadly light in the air. The crowd roared its approval. This was what they had come to see. A Cathari warrior, in full fury. It was beautiful and terrifying. Hana continued to retreat, her movements minimal and precise. She wasn't running away. She was measuring. Every time Velthar struck, she learned something new about how he moved, how he thought, how he fought. "Stand and fight," Velthar roared. His red eyes blazed with anger. In Cathari culture, retreating from combat was shameful. Hana's refusal to engage was insulting him. That was exactly what Hana wanted. An angry fighter made mistakes. Velthar lunged forward with all 4 blades in a simultaneous strike, a move designed to give his opponent nowhere to escape. It was a classic Cathari finishing technique, one that had won countless battles. Hana dropped low and rolled forward, passing under his arms and coming up behind him. Before he could turn, she struck the back of his knee with her palm, a precise hit to a joint gap in his crystalline armor. In a real fight, the strike would have crippled him. In the contest, it scored a point. The arena fell silent. The moderator's voice broke the stillness. "Point to the human. Round 1 complete." Velthar spun around, his face twisted with shock and rage. No one had scored a point against him in over 50 contests. "Lucky strike," he growled. The second round began. This time, Velthar was more cautious. He approached slowly, his blades weaving defensive patterns. He was trying to force Hana to attack, to come into range of his weapons. Hana waited. She stood perfectly still, watching him. Her breathing was slow and controlled. She looked like she was meditating rather than fighting. This patience frustrated Velthar even more than her retreat had. Cathari warriors were trained to be aggressive, to dominate the battlefield. This strange human refused to fight the way he expected. She refused to play by the rules he understood. Finally, Velthar's patience broke. He attacked again, this time mixing his strikes with feints, trying to trick Hana into committing to a defense that would leave her open. It was a more sophisticated approach, the kind of technique that had defeated veteran warriors from a dozen species. Hana saw through every feint. She had been watching him for 15 minutes now, studying not just his techniques, but the way he thought. The Cathari style was ancient and refined, passed down through generations. It was perfect in its execution, and that perfection made it predictable. When Velthar committed to what he thought was a sure strike, Hana was already moving. She caught one of his wrists, used his own momentum to pull him off balance, and swept his legs out from under him. The War Master crashed to the arena floor. Hana's hand touched his throat, a killing strike if she had chosen to follow through. Point to the human. Round 2 complete. The crowd was no longer laughing. A strange tension filled the arena. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Cathari were invincible. Everyone knew that. But this small human was winning. Velthar climbed to his feet slowly. His crystalline armor had cracks in it from the fall. His red eyes stared at Hana, with a mixture of anger, confusion, and something else. Respect, perhaps, or fear. The third round lasted longer. Velthar had finally accepted that he couldn't overwhelm Hana with aggression, or trick her with feints. He began to fight more carefully, trying to adapt to her style. It was a smart decision, but it came too late. Hana had already learned everything she needed to know about him. She started to press forward now, forcing him to defend. It was a strange sight. The massive Cathari warrior with his 4 arms and energy blades was being pushed back by a small human woman with no weapons. But Hana's attacks were relentless and precise. She struck at the gaps in his armor, the joints where his crystalline plates met. Each hit was perfectly placed, perfectly timed. Velthar defended desperately, but his 4 arms couldn't be everywhere at once. Hana's smaller size was an advantage now. She could move inside his guard, too close for his long blades to be effective. When she struck his elbow joint for the 3rd point, the moderator's voice seemed to echo in the stunned silence. Point to the human. The human champion leads 3 rounds to 0. In the crowd, Ambassador Day-One allowed himself a small smile. Beside him, delegates from other species were whispering urgently to each other. The impossible was happening. A human was defeating a Cathari war master. Velthar stood in the center of the arena, his chest heaving. He looked at his 4 hands, at his weapons, as if they had betrayed him. "How?" he said. His voice was quiet now, all the arrogance gone. "How are you doing this?" Hana looked at him calmly. When she spoke, her voice was respectful. "You're stronger than me. You're faster than me. Your weapons are better than mine. Your armor is better than mine. In every physical way, you're superior. Then how are you winning?" "Because I don't try to match your strengths," Hana said. "I understand them, I respect them, and I find the spaces between them. Your fighting style is 300 years old. It's perfect and beautiful, but it's also predictable. Every move follows a pattern. Once I learned the pattern, I knew where you would be before you knew yourself." Velthar was silent for a long moment. Then he raised his weapons. "There are still 2 rounds. I will not surrender." "I know," Hana said, "and I respect that." The 4th round was different from the others. Velthar fought with a kind of desperate creativity, abandoning the traditional Cathari techniques and trying improvised attacks. Without the structured patterns Hana had learned to predict, he was actually more dangerous. He managed to score his first point by catching Hana with an unexpected sweep of his lower arm, while she was focused on his blade work. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Cathari delegation roared their approval. Their champion wasn't finished yet. The fifth round would decide the trial. 3 points to 1, Hana needed only one more point to win. But Velthar, fighting with nothing left to lose, had become truly dangerous. He combined techniques from different styles, mixing aggressive rushes with patient defense, trying anything and everything to keep Hana off balance. They fought for 20 minutes, neither able to score the decisive point. Both fighters were breathing hard now. Sweat ran down Hana's face. Cracks had spread across Velthar's crystalline armor from the impacts he had taken. In the crowd, some species were starting to cheer for Hana, not because they supported humanity, but because they were witnessing something they had thought impossible. The Cathari could be beaten. The order of the galaxy was not as permanent as they had believed. Finally, Hana saw her opening. Velthar, exhausted and frustrated, repeated a combination he had used earlier. It was only for a fraction of a second, a momentary return to his trained patterns, but that fraction of a second was enough. Hana moved inside his guard one last time. She struck his chest plate, directly over where a Cathari's heart would be. The impact echoed through the arena. Point to the human. The first trial ends. The human champion wins 5 rounds to 1. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The reality of what had just happened was too shocking to process immediately. Then, slowly, the arena erupted. Not in laughter this time, but in a roar of amazement and disbelief. Some species cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. The Cathari delegation looked like they had witnessed the end of the world. Velthar lowered his weapons. He looked at Hana with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then, slowly, he performed a gesture she recognized from her studies. It was the Cathari sign of respect between warriors. Only given after a hard-fought battle. Hana returned the gesture. As she walked off the arena floor, Hana passed by Ambassador Day 1. He was trying to maintain his diplomatic composure, but she could see the excitement in his eyes. 1 trial down, he said quietly. 6 more to go. The next ones will be harder, Hana said. Now he knows I'm a real threat. He'll adapt. So will you. Hana nodded. She had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought nagged at her. The Cathari had held the Guardian contract for 300 years. They had built their entire civilization around martial superiority. What would they do if they lost that identity? What price would they be willing to pay to get it back? In the Cathari delegation chamber, Velthar stood before his people's ambassadors. His crystalline armor was being repaired by technicians, but the damage to his pride would take much longer to heal. This cannot stand, one of the ambassadors said. His name was Kethran, and he was the voice of the Cathari Emperor. We cannot lose to humans. We cannot lose to anyone. She is skilled, Velthar admitted. The words tasted like poison, but he was too honest a warrior to deny what he had experienced. More skilled than any opponent I have faced. Then you will train harder. You will study her techniques. You will do whatever is necessary to win the remaining trials. Kethran's eyes blazed with cold fire. The Cathari Empire does not accept defeat. Not now. Not ever. Velthar nodded slowly. But as he stood there, surrounded by his people's expectations and demands, he felt something he had never experienced before in his 300 years of life. Doubt. The remaining 6 trials tested Hana in different ways. There were tactical defense scenarios where she had to protect a diplomat from simulated attacks. There were endurance tests that pushed her body to its limits. There were strategic planning exercises that tested her mind rather than her body. Through all of them, Velthar pushed himself harder than he ever had before, trying to find a way to defeat the human who had shattered his world. He won 2 of the trials. Hana won 4. When the 7 days ended, the The moderator announced the results to the assembled galaxy. The Terran Federation has won the contest of Guardians. Humanity will hold the Guardian contract for the next 100 years. The Cathari delegation walked out of the Citadel in silence. They did not speak to anyone. They did not acknowledge the congratulations offered to the human delegation. They simply left, their crystalline armor seeming dimmer than before, as if the light had gone out of them. Ambassador Day One should have felt triumphant. Humanity had just achieved something impossible. They had defeated a species that had dominated galactic security for 3 centuries. The economic and political benefits would be enormous. Earth would become a major player in galactic affairs overnight. But when Day One looked at the Cathari ships leaving the Citadel, he felt uneasy. Hana, standing beside him, watched them go with a troubled expression. "They won't accept this," she said quietly. "The laws are clear," Day One replied. "The contest is binding. They have no choice. Laws only matter if people choose to follow them." Hana turned to look at him. "We didn't just beat them in combat. We destroyed their entire identity. For 300 years, being warriors has been the foundation of their civilization. What happens to a people when you take away the thing that defines them?" Day One didn't have an answer. The first sign of trouble came 3 months later. A human cargo ship traveling through neutral space was attacked by pirates. The ship was destroyed. All crew members killed. It was tragic, but not unusual. Space was vast, and pirates were a constant danger. Then it happened again. And again. Within 6 months, 12 human ships had been attacked. The pirates always escaped before any help could arrive. They seemed to know exactly when and where human ships would be vulnerable. Ambassador Day One brought his concerns to the Galactic Council. "These attacks are coordinated," he said. "Someone is providing the pirates with intelligence about human shipping routes." The council investigated. They found nothing. The pirates left no evidence, no trail to follow. It was as if they were ghosts. But Hana noticed something. Every single pirate attack had happened in sectors where Cathari ships were known to patrol. When she mentioned this to Day One, he shook his head. "We can't accuse them without proof. And we have none." The attacks continued. Human colonies on the frontier started reporting strange incidents. Equipment failures. Supply shortages. Nothing that could be directly linked to sabotage, but too many problems happening too frequently to be coincidence. Then human diplomats started facing difficulties. Species that had been friendly suddenly became cold. Trade agreements fell through at the last moment. Political alliances shifted without explanation. It was subtle, the kind of pressure that couldn't be traced to any single source. But the effect was clear. Humanity was being isolated. Ambassador Day One was not a fool. He understood what was happening. The Cathari couldn't challenge humanity directly without violating council law. Open warfare would turn the other species against them, but they could wage a different kind of war, one fought in the shadows with economics and politics instead of weapons. He called an emergency meeting with Earth's government. The conversation happened over a secure channel, with a delay of several seconds as the signals crossed the vast distance between Earth and the Citadel. "They're trying to strangle us," Day One explained. "They're using their 300 years of influence to turn the galaxy against us. Every time we try to establish a trade route, they whisper in the right ears, and the deal falls apart. Every time we try to make friends, they remind everyone that we're upstart newcomers who don't respect tradition." The face of Earth's president appeared on the screen, looking tired and worried. "Can we prove they're behind it?" "No. That's the genius of their approach. They're not doing anything illegal. They're just using their relationships and their reputation. After 3 centuries as the guardians of galactic security, they have friends everywhere. So what do? Day One was quiet for a moment. "We endure. We be patient. We prove that we deserve the position we won. Not through combat, but through our actions. We need to show the galaxy that we're not just warriors, but reliable partners." "That could take decades," the president said. "Or longer," Day One admitted. "The Cathari are playing a long game. So must we." Years passed, then decades. The Cathari pressure never stopped. but it never escalated into open war either. They remained just inside the boundaries of acceptable behavior, always able to claim that their actions were legitimate business or politics. Humanity adapted. They established relationships with smaller species that the Cathari had ignored or dismissed. They shared technology and knowledge freely, building goodwill slowly and carefully. They trained their guardians according to Hana's philosophy, teaching them that true strength came from understanding rather than domination. And they waited. Ambassador Daewon grew old. His hair turned white. His face became lined with wrinkles. He spent 40 years at the Citadel, watching the slow evolution of galactic politics. When he finally retired, his replacement was a woman named Ji-won, one of his best students. She continued his work, maintaining humanity's position through patience and persistence. The Cathari challenged the Guardian contract 3 more times over the years. Each time, a human Guardian defeated their champion. The victories were never easy, but they were consistent. With each defeat, the Cathari's reputation suffered more damage. Their empire, built on the foundation of martial superiority, began to crack. Internal divisions emerged among the Cathari. A younger generation questioned whether their civilization should depend so heavily on combat prowess. Why not focus on trade, or science, or art? But the old guard refused to consider such ideas. They had been warriors for thousands of years. They would not become something else just because they had lost a few contests. The conflict between old and new within Cathari society made them even more dangerous to humanity. The traditionalists needed to prove that the old ways were still valid. They needed to show that combat strength still mattered. And the easiest way to do that was to make humanity pay for their victories. 80 years after Hana's first victory, the situation reached a crisis point. A human colony on the frontier was attacked by what appeared to be rebels from a dozen different species. The attack was devastating. 3,000 humans died before help could arrive. The investigation revealed that all the weapons used in the attack had come from Cathari armories. When confronted with this evidence, the Cathari ambassador claimed the weapons had been stolen years ago. There was no proof that the Cathari government had been involved. The new human ambassador, a man named Byung-ho, brought the matter before the council. "We all know the truth," he said, his voice steady despite his anger. "The Cathari cannot defeat us in open combat, so they attack us through proxies. They hide behind legal technicalities while humans die. How long will the council allow this to continue?" The council debated for weeks. Some species supported humanity's position. Others defended the Cathari, pointing out the lack of direct evidence. Many simply wanted the problem to go away. They were tired of the tension between humanity and the Cathari, tired of being forced to choose sides. In the end, the council issued a statement condemning all attacks on civilian populations, but stopped short of blaming the Cathari directly. It was a diplomatic solution that satisfied no one. The quiet war continued. More decades passed. Humanity lost thousands of people to pirate attacks, sabotage, and mysterious accidents. But they never backed down, never withdrew from galactic affairs. Every time the Cathari thought they had pushed humanity to the breaking point, the humans found the strength to endure a little longer. And slowly, very slowly, the balance began to shift. The species that humanity had befriended, the ones too small or weak to interest the Cathari, started to become important trading partners. The technology humanity shared freely began to bear fruit. The philosophy of cooperation rather than domination that human guardians taught started to spread. 120 years after Hana's victory, Ambassador Sun Hee received a private message from a Cathari diplomat named Varthen. The message was simple. "We need to talk. Alone." They met in a neutral location, a small station on the edge of known space. Varthen was young by Cathari standards, barely 200 years old. He looked tired. "My people are destroying themselves," he said without preamble. "The conflict with humanity is bleeding us dry. Our economy is weak from the loss of the Guardian contract. Our society is divided between those who want to continue the struggle and those who want to find a new path. We cannot keep doing this." Sun Hee studied him carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to end this war before it consumes us both completely. But I cannot convince the old guard to make peace. They see any compromise as weakness, any negotiation as surrender. What do you want from me? Var then leaned forward. War Master Velthar still lives. He is ancient now, kept alive by medical technology. He has become a symbol of the old ways. The warrior who lost to you, if he challenges for the Guardian contract one final time and is defeated with honor, it might give my people a way to accept peace. A way to move forward without feeling they have betrayed everything we are. Sun He was quiet for a long moment. You're asking us to give Velthar a chance to reclaim his honor in defeat? Yes. It sounds strange, I know. But my people need this. We need to see that we fought bravely, that we lost to worthy opponents, and that there is no shame in accepting reality. Varthen's red eyes met hers. Help us find a way to end this with dignity, and perhaps we can finally have peace. Sun He thought about the 120 years of conflict, the thousands of humans who had died, the resources wasted on a pointless struggle. She thought about patience and endurance, about playing the long game, and she thought about what Hana had told Ambassador Day One all those years ago. Laws only matter if people choose to follow them. And people need a reason to choose. I'll speak with my government, Sun He said finally, but I can't promise anything. As she left the meeting, Sun He wondered if they were finally approaching the end of this long, strange war, or if this was just another Cathari trick, another way to hurt humanity without breaking the rules. Only time would tell. And time was the one thing both sides had learned to understand very well. The debate on Earth lasted for months. The government was divided. Some officials wanted to reject the Cathari proposal entirely, after 180 years of attacks and sabotage. Why should humanity help the Cathari save face? Let them suffer the consequences of their actions. Others saw an opportunity. The conflict was hurting humanity too. Every year spent fighting this shadow war was a year not spent growing and developing. If there was a way to end it, shouldn't they try? Ambassador Sun He argued for acceptance. We're not helping them, she explained in a meeting with Earth's leadership. We're helping ourselves. This war has cost us thousands of lives and countless resources. If we can end it, we should. And if that means giving an old warrior a chance to regain his honor, that's a small price to pay for peace. What if it's a trick? Asked the defense minister. What if they're just trying to manipulate us again? Then we'll deal with it. But I met Var then. I looked him in the eyes. He's tired of fighting. His whole generation is tired of fighting. They want a future that's about more than warfare and revenge. Finally, after much discussion, Earth's government agreed. The Cathari would be allowed to issue one final challenge, and humanity's guardian would be ready. The guardian chosen for this contest was a young man named Tae Min. He was barely 30 years old, but he had trained his entire life for this role. He was a student of Hana's students, part of the third generation of human guardians. He had studied the recordings of every contest of guardians, including the original match between Hana and Velthar. When Sun He told him about the situation, Tae Min listened carefully. They want their warrior to lose with honor, he said slowly. That's complicated. Very complicated, Sun He agreed. You still have to win. Humanity can't afford to lose the Guardian contract now. Not after everything we've invested. Sun He agreed. Sun He agreed. But you need to win in a way that gives the Cathari dignity. Can you do that? Tae Min thought about it for a long time. I can try. The announcement of Velthar's challenge sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The War Master was over 400 years old, ancient even by Cathari standards. Medical technology kept him alive, but everyone knew he was a shadow of his former self. Why would he challenge now? Some species understood. They saw it for what it was. A final attempt to end the long conflict between humanity and the Cathari. Others saw it as pathetic. A desperate grasp at past glory. The Cathari ignored all the opinions and prepared for the contest. The day of the challenge, the arena was even more crowded than it had been 180 years ago. Billions across the galaxy tuned in to watch. This wasn't just another contest of guardians. This was history. This was the end of an era. One way or another, Velthar entered the arena slowly. His crystalline armor, once bright and strong, was dull now, covered with cracks and repairs from centuries of battles. His forearms moved stiffly, his red eyes were dimmer than before, but he stood straight and proud, every centimeter a warrior. Taemin stood at the other end of the arena, young and strong and ready. He wore simple black clothing like Hana had, carrying no weapons. When he saw Velthar, he felt a strange mixture of emotions. This old warrior had fought against humanity for nearly 2 centuries. He was responsible, directly or indirectly, for thousands of human deaths, but he was also a person who had dedicated his entire life to his people, who had watched his civilization's identity crumble, who now stood here knowing he would almost certainly lose but refusing to surrender without a fight. The moderator spoke. The rules remain as they were. 5 rounds of single combat. First to 3 points wins. Begin. Velthar moved forward, much slower than he had 180 years ago. His old body couldn't manage the explosive speed he once had, but his technique was still perfect, refined by centuries of practice. His foreblades moved in patterns that Taemin recognized from his studies, the traditional Cathari forms passed down through generations. Taemin could have ended it quickly. Velthar's age made him vulnerable in dozens of ways. A fast, aggressive assault would overwhelm him in minutes. But that wasn't what this contest needed. Instead, Taemin fought carefully, meeting Velthar's traditional style with respect. He defended when the old warrior attacked, never counterattacking too quickly. He made the match look competitive, giving Velthar chances to show his skill. The crowd watched in silence. They understood what they were seeing. This wasn't just a combat trial. It was a ceremony. A ritual to mark the end of an age. The first round went to Velthar. He scored a point with a clever combination that Taemin allowed to succeed. The Cathari delegation roared their approval. Their champion was not finished yet, but the second and third rounds went to Taemin. Not through tricks or cheap shots, but through clean, technical victories. He showed his speed, his precision, his mastery of combat theory. He proved that humanity's guardians had earned their position. As they prepared for the 4th round, Taemin noticed something. Velthar was breathing hard, his old body struggling with the exertion. But there was something else in his eyes now, not just determination or pride. There was peace. The War Master knew he was going to lose. He had known before the contest even began. But he was fighting anyway, giving everything he had, proving that the Cathari spirit was not broken, even in defeat. The 4th round lasted longer than the others. Both fighters were tired now. Velthar's age worked against him, but Taemin had been holding back, trying to make the match meaningful, and the effort of restraining himself was exhausting in its own way. They circled each other slowly. The crowd was completely silent now, holding its breath. Taemin thought about everything he had studied, everything Hana had taught her students: understanding your opponent, respecting them, finding the balance between victory and dignity. He remembered something Hana had written in her journals, something that had been passed down to every human guardian. The greatest victory is one that transforms an enemy into a friend. Taemin made his decision. He stepped forward and deliberately fought in the Cathari style. He had studied it for years, learned every form, every technique. Now he showed Velthar that humanity had not just defeated the Cathari, they had learned from them. They had respected Cathari martial arts enough to master them. Velthar's eyes widened in surprise. Then, slowly, something like a smile crossed his alien features. He understood what Taemin was doing. The young human was saying, in the only language a warrior truly understood, that the Cathari traditions had value, that they would not be forgotten or dismissed. They fought in the traditional style, both following the ancient forms. It was beautiful to watch. A dance as much as a battle. And when Taemin scored the final point, using a Cathari technique perfectly executed, the entire arena understood what they had witnessed. The human guardian wins, the moderator announced. The contest is complete. Velthar lowered his weapons. For a long moment, he just stood there, looking at Taemin. Then he did something that shocked everyone watching. He performed the full Cathari warrior's salute. The gesture of respect that one master gives to another. It was an acknowledgement that Taemin was not just a worthy opponent, but a true warrior who understood what combat really meant. Taemin returned the salute, bowing deeply in the human fashion as well. When he straightened up, he spoke in Cathari. Words he had memorized for this moment. War Master Velthar, you have taught us what it means to fight with honor. Your people's traditions will live on, not as our enemy's legacy but as our teacher's gift. We will carry the knowledge forward. Tears ran down Velthar's crystalline face. In the Cathari delegation, many were crying openly now. For 180 years, they had fought to reclaim their identity. Now, in defeat, they had found something they hadn't expected: acknowledgement, respect, a place in the galaxy that didn't require them to dominate everyone else. After the contest, Ambassador Sun He met with the Cathari delegation. Vardhan was there, along with several other young Cathari leaders. To her surprise, Velthar was there too. We wish to negotiate, Vardhan said formally. Not surrender. Negotiation. A proper end to our conflict. Sun He nodded. We're willing to listen. The negotiations took months. Both sides had demands, grievances, positions that seemed impossible to reconcile. But slowly, with patience and effort, they found common ground. The Cathari would stop their campaign against humanity. They would acknowledge humanity's right to the Guardian contract. In return, humanity would establish a cultural exchange program, teaching other species the Cathari martial traditions alongside human techniques. The Cathari fighting style would not die. It would evolve, becoming part of galactic culture, rather than the exclusive property of one species. Trade agreements were signed, reparations were discussed and settled. Slowly, carefully, two civilizations that had been at war for 180 years began to build something new. One day, near the end of the negotiations, Velthar asked to speak with Taemin privately. They met in a quiet garden on the Citadel, a place where plants from hundreds of worlds grew together. Why did you do it? Velthar asked. In the contest. You could have defeated me quickly, humiliated me. Instead, you gave me dignity. Why? Taemin thought carefully before answering. Because Hana taught us that the point of strength isn't to crush others. It's to protect what matters, and sometimes, what matters most is helping your enemy find a way to stop being your enemy. Velthar nodded slowly. She was wise, your first guardian. I wish I could have faced her when I was young, before pride and anger poisoned my thinking. He looked at Taemin with his dim red eyes. I spent 180 years trying to destroy your people, because you defeated me. I wasted centuries on revenge when I could have been building something better. It's not too late, Taemin said. You helped end the war. That's worth something. Perhaps. Velthar turned to look at the stars visible through the garden's transparent dome. I am old, young warrior. I will not live to see the peace we are building, but I am glad that it will exist. Tell your people. Tell them that not all Cathari wanted this war. Tell them that some of us are grateful it's finally over. I will, Taemin promised. A few months later, War Master Velthar died peacefully in his sleep. He was 420 years old. The Cathari gave him a warrior's funeral, with full honors. To everyone's surprise, Ambassador Sun He attended, along with Taemin and a delegation of human guardians. When asked why they came to honor a warrior who had fought against humanity for so long, Sun He's answer was simple: because that's what peace looks like. You don't just stop fighting. You learn to respect the people you fought against. You recognize their humanity. Even when they're not human. The galaxy watched and learned. 20 years after Velthar's death, the galaxy looked very different. The Galactic Council had changed, adapted, evolved. The old power structures based purely on military strength had given way to something more complex, more interesting, more alive. Ambassador Mi-young stood at the center of the Great Chamber, addressing the assembled delegates. She was the fifth human to serve as Earth's primary ambassador to the Council, following in the footsteps of Day-1, G-1, Byung-ho, and Sun-hee. But she was the first to serve in a galaxy truly at peace. Beside her stood her guardian. And this was what made many delegates smile. He was Cathari, a young warrior named Kethvar. His crystalline armor gleamed with health and pride. His forearms rested calmly at his sides. He was the grandson of Velthar, and he had chosen to serve humanity. 200 years ago, Mi-young said, her voice carrying through the vast chamber, my predecessor, Ambassador Day-1, stood here with his guardian Hana and challenged the Cathari Empire for the Guardian contract. That challenge led to victory, then to 180 years of conflict, then finally to peace. She paused, looking around at the hundreds of species represented in the chamber. It would be easy to look back at those years and see only the cost, the lives lost, the resources wasted, the suffering caused by pride and fear. But I choose to see something else. I see a lesson that changed the galaxy. On the wall behind her, a hologram appeared showing the memorial that had been built on the citadel. It showed two figures standing back to back. Hana, small and determined, and Velthar, massive and proud. The memorial had become one of the most visited sites on the citadel. These two warriors, Mi-young continued, represent more than just human and Cathari. They represent the choice every civilization must make. Do we define ourselves by our ability to dominate others, or do we find strength in cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect? In the Cathari section of the chamber, the delegates listened carefully. Their society had transformed over the past 20 years. They were no longer just warriors, they had become teachers, sharing their martial traditions with anyone who wanted to learn. They had become engineers, using their natural strength and forearms to build structures other species couldn't manage. They had become artists, creating crystalline sculptures that were considered treasures throughout the galaxy. And they were happy, truly happy, in a way they hadn't been for centuries. The burden of maintaining dominance, of proving themselves superior to everyone else, had been crushing them without them realizing it. Now, freed from that burden, they had discovered new aspects of themselves. Mi-young gestured to Kethvar. My guardian represents the future we're building together. He chose to serve humanity not because his people were conquered, but because he believes in what we stand for. And he is not alone. In the Terran Guardian Academy, we now train warriors from 70 different species. They learn human techniques and Cathari forms and fighting styles from dozens of other civilizations. She smiled. We call it the Hana method now. Study your opponent not to defeat them, but to understand them. Respect their strengths. Learn from their techniques. And through that understanding, find a way to exist together, peacefully. A delegate from the Veltari Collective, a species of floating energy beings, spoke up. Ambassador Mi-young, your words are inspiring. But not everyone in the galaxy has embraced this new philosophy. There are still conflicts, still wars. What do you say to those who believe strength through domination is the only path? Mi-young nodded. I say this. Look at the Cathari. 200 years ago, they were the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They could defeat anyone in combat, and yet they were miserable. Their entire civilization was built on a foundation of proving themselves superior to everyone else. When that foundation cracked, their whole world nearly fell apart. She looked directly at the Cathari delegation. But they survived. They adapted. They found a new way to exist that doesn't require them to dominate anyone. And now they are stronger than ever. Not in spite of making peace with their former enemies, but because of it. Kethvar stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant. I never met my grandfather Velthar. He died before I was born. But I have studied his life, read his journals, watched recordings of his battles, and I understand now what took him so long to learn. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My grandfather fought Hana because he believed Cathari's strength came from being better than everyone else. He spent 180 years trying to prove that defeating us was a mistake, that we were still the superior warriors. And in all that time, he was unhappy, angry, bitter. Kethvar's red eyes looked out at the assembled delegates. But at the end, when he fought Taemin, something changed. Taemin showed him respect, showed him that Cathari traditions had value even if we weren't the galaxy's sole guardians. And my grandfather finally found peace. He turned to me, young. I serve humanity not because my people lost a war. I serve because humans taught us that real strength comes from cooperation, that the most powerful civilization isn't the one that can defeat everyone else, but the one that can turn enemies into friends. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, delegates from hundreds of species began to applaud. Not everyone, of course. There were still those who believed in the old ways, who thought cooperation was weakness, but they were fewer now than they had been 20 years ago. After the assembly, Mi-young walked through the Citadel Gardens with Kethvar and several other delegates. They talked about trade agreements and cultural exchanges, about the mundane details of maintaining galactic civilization. It was boring, routine work, the kind of thing that never made history. And that was exactly the point. Peace was boring. Peace was routine. Peace was thousands of small decisions made every day to cooperate instead of fight. They stopped at the memorial for Hana and Velthar. Someone had left flowers, a human tradition that had spread to other species. Offerings from a dozen different worlds lay at the base of the monument. I wish I could have met her, Kethvar said, looking up at the statue of Hana. She was remarkable, Mi-young agreed. But she would have told you that she was just doing her job, protecting her ambassador, serving her people. She never set out to change the galaxy. Sometimes the people who change the world are the ones who weren't trying to, Kethvar said thoughtfully. They just did what needed to be done. On Earth, in the Terran Guardian Academy, a new class of students was beginning their training. Among them were humans, Cathari, Veltari, and dozens of other species. They came from worlds that had been enemies just decades ago. Now they trained side by side, learning from each other. An old instructor stood before them. Her name was Bo-Ra, and she had been one of Hana's last students before the legendary guardian died peacefully at the age of 98. Bo-Ra was 70 now, her hair completely white, but her eyes were still sharp, and her movements still precise. Before we begin, Bo-Ra said, I want to tell you about the woman who created this academy. Guardian Hana was not the strongest fighter. She was not the fastest. She did not have any special powers or abilities. She was just a human woman who understood something important. The students listened carefully. Some of them had heard stories about Hana. She had become almost mythical in the 2 centuries since her first victory. Hana understood that every opponent, every enemy, is a person. They have reasons for what they do. They have strengths and weaknesses. They have pride and fear and hope. Bo-Ra walked among the students. And if you take the time to understand those things, you don't just become a better fighter, you become someone who might not have to fight at all. A young Cathari student raised one of his 4 hands. But Guardian Hana did fight. She fought Velthar. She defeated him. Yes, Bo-Ra agreed. Because sometimes fighting is necessary. Sometimes you must stand up for what's right, must protect those who cannot protect themselves. But the goal of strength is not to defeat others. The goal is to make defeating others unnecessary. She walked to the center of the training hall. You are here to become guardians. You will learn to fight, to protect, to defend. But more importantly, you will learn to understand, to recognize when words are better than weapons, to see your opponent not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a person to be understood. Bo-Ra paused, looking at the mixed group of students. The contest war lasted 180 years. Thousands died. Resources were wasted. Civilizations suffered. And in the end, it ended not because one side was destroyed, but because both sides learned to respect each other. She smiled. That is the legacy Hana left us. Not just victory in combat, but the wisdom to know that the greatest victories are the ones that transform enemies into friends. The students began their training. Human students learned Cathari forms. Cathari students learned human techniques. They sparred together, laughed together, made mistakes together, and slowly, they learned that the alien training beside them wasn't an enemy or a threat, but a partner and friend. Years passed. The peace held. There were still problems, still conflicts, still misunderstandings. Peace was not easy, and it was never perfect. But the galaxy had learned something important from the contest war. Strength alone did not build lasting civilizations. Cooperation did. Understanding did. Respect did. On the 200th anniversary of Hana's first victory, the Galactic Council held a special ceremony. Representatives from every member species gathered at the memorial. Mi Young was there, now old herself and nearing retirement. Keth Var stood beside her, his crystalline armor bearing the marks of 20 years of service. The ceremony was simple. Each species laid an offering at the memorial, representing their commitment to the principles Hana and Velthar had come to represent. Peace through understanding, strength through cooperation, victory through respect. When it was humanity's turn, Mi Young stepped forward. She placed a simple wooden box at the base of the memorial. Inside were Hana's journals, preserved carefully for 2 centuries. They detailed her thoughts, her training methods, her philosophy of combat and protection. These journals belong to the galaxy now, Mi Young said. Hana's wisdom should not be kept by one species. Let everyone learn from her. Let everyone benefit from what she taught us. The crowd murmured its approval. The journals would be copied, translated into every known language, studied by guardians across the galaxy. As the ceremony ended and delegates began to leave, a young human girl approached the memorial. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, and she was holding her father's hand. She looked up at the statues of Hana and Velthar with wide eyes. "Papa," she asked. Were they friends? Her father knelt down beside her. Not at first. At first, they were enemies. They fought each other. "But they're standing together in the statue," the girl said, confused. "That's the important part," her father explained. "They started as enemies, but they ended as, well, not quite friends. But they learned to respect each other. And that respect helped end a long war." The girl thought about this. "So, even if someone is your enemy, they might not always be your enemy?" "Exactly," her father said, smiling. "People can change. Civilizations can change. If you're willing to try to understand them, if you're willing to show them respect, sometimes enemies can become something else." The girl looked up at the statue again. "I want to be like her when I grow up. The small one, Hana." "Then you'll need to train hard and study harder," her father said. "Being a guardian isn't easy." "I know," the girl said seriously, "but it's important." As they walked away, Mi Young watched them go. She thought about Day One, who had started all of this 2 centuries ago with a simple challenge. She thought about Hana, who had won that challenge and changed the galaxy. She thought about all the ambassadors and guardians who had come after, each adding their own piece to the piece they were building. And she thought about the future. That little girl, and millions like her across hundreds of worlds, growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was valued more than domination, where different species learned from each other instead of fighting each other, where the strength to understand was considered greater than the strength to destroy. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than it had been. And that was enough. The contest had lasted 180 years. But the peace it created, the lesson it taught, would last much longer. Perhaps forever. In the plaza, the statues of Hana and Velthar stood silent, watching over a galaxy they had helped to transform. 2 warriors who had started as enemies, who had fought with everything they had, and who had finally taught the galaxy that true strength came not from defeating your enemies, but from finding a way to exist with them in peace. The sun set over the citadel, casting long shadows across the memorial. And across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, people looked up at the stars and thought about the lessons learned over 2 centuries of conflict and peace. The contest war was over, but its legacy would never end.